It was during that trip that the Lord helped me to understand that this might be the woman, that this was the woman that the Lord had prepared for marriage for me.
I moved to America. I found out the man I married is not perfect.
Surprise.
And I'm not perfect either. So we definitely need help. And then the Lord is our help. We started our process, my process, to gain my green card. I received a notice that my application is rejected. And the notice said that if I don't appeal, I need to be out of America in 30 days. You know what? At the same time, I found out I'm pregnant. God's timing is like just perfect. Like I got my green card right before the baby was born.
As the Lord's doing something through our lives, like He's faithful to the details, and we're just faithful. We just need to be faithful to be obedient to Him. As you place Him in the center of your life, collectively, the center of your marriage, and center of your lives, individually, the Lord He holds it together. Hey, my name is Levi. This is my wife Belle. I was raised in a Christian home with godly parents, actually in a Calvary chapel, and at a very young age I came to understand the gospel and made a profession of faith. But it wasn't really until later in life, and when I was in college, actually in 2011, where the Lord got a hold of my heart, really. I was at a Calvary Chapel, Gainesville, and a pastor had taken me under his wing and discipled me, spent some time with me, and helped me to study the Bible, and helped me to understand what it meant to hear the voice of the Lord through the Scriptures. And it was during that time and the following years that the Lord really grew my faith, really, and helped me understand what it meant to follow Him as a disciple more than just trust Him for salvation. Fast forward 6 or 7 years later, in 2018, the same pastor was routinely going to mainland China and spending time there with different churches throughout the country, and exhorting them, encouraging them, teaching some of them how to study the Bible for themselves so that they could, then pass it on to others. Doing a number of different things, kind of modeling the Paul's ministry in Acts, really, as he would go from church to church and exhort and edify the different churches. He was kind of modeling that inside mainland China. And he invited me to come with him. Actually, on the first trip, myself and my sister went with him. And during the course of that trip, one of the stops that we made was in Belle's hometown in Dongguan. And we did actually technically meet at that point, although there really was no interaction beyond just a greeting. Belle was part of a Bible study that Ted had taught, the pastor that we were traveling with. Another year and a half later or so, I went back with Ted, and we traveled. And during that point, we spent a little bit more time in the city that Belle's from, in Dongguan, and got to know each other a little bit more. But it was still very platonic. At that point, I was, truthfully, I couldn't fathom in my mind what a relationship with somebody on the other side of the world would even look like. And I wasn't necessarily looking for a relationship. We'll talk about that in a minute. But fast forward again, in 2020, the very beginning of 2020, we spent 3 weeks or so in a city very near where Belle in China on another trip. And once again, in this trip, we actually spent a fair amount of time together. And it was really, to make a really long story short, it was during that trip that the Lord helped me to understand that this might be the woman, that this was the woman that the Lord had prepared for marriage for me. I came back from that trip with an understanding that this is what the Lord was doing, and that He was actually calling us to pursue a relationship. And so we were praying about it, and of course, shortly thereafter, there was a certain illness that spread around the world and basically shut the entire world down, which for us turned out to be this incredible blessing, because it forced us to have this long distance relationship where the only way that we could really spend time together was via phone call. And there wasn't an opportunity really to visit one another. And so we were forced to really spend time intentionally learning how to communicate with one another prior to marriage, which just one small way that the Lord kind of orchestrated the details of our lives to allow for us to be able to have, to glorify Him in our marriage, really, but in a way that we couldn't have planned for, or certainly wouldn't have planned for. During the 2 years or so following the January of 2020, we about halfway through that time period, so about a year later, we determined that this is what the Lord has. We came to understand that, And the Lord had spoken to both of us individually. And so we started the process on getting Belle a visa to come to the U.S. The process was extremely smooth, especially compared to everybody else in that time frame specifically. When getting anything out of any government agency seemed like it was extremely tedious because of the COVID restrictions and things that were going on. But our process was incredibly smooth. Just the hand of the Lord was upon us. Within 8 months, we had a visa. She had a visa, I should say, and to come to the U.S. And then about a year after that, she ended up staying for a couple extra months beyond that to finish out the school year there, and then came to the U.S. and we got married shortly thereafter. That would have been in December of 2022, and or 2021. Sorry, yeah. And it's been rainbows and butterflies ever since, right? There's been absolutely no problems. Yeah. No, obviously not the case. The Lord's certainly been faithful through all of it, though.
I was born in China in a non-Christian family. Prior to becoming a Christian, I chased after the world, but I found myself unfulfilled. I found myself, I was not pretty enough, have no money, have no good education, I don't have a good job, very hopeless. More important than that, I'm the third child in my family, and I felt unloved, most of the time. And in 2014, I got an opportunity to be a co-worker with a believer. And how she is pretty honest, pretty upright, which is caught my attention. That's not what people do. Honestly, they're trying to gain more profit than what people need. But she would not sell to customers what they do not need. So she's pretty honest, and she shared the gospel with me that there's a truth, absolute truth would not change, and I'm pretty curious. So she invited me to church, and I went with her. And that Sunday, I went to church. While we stepped in the room, they were worshiping. There was lyric on the screen. I can read the Chinese, but I did not understand what that meant. He said, Yahweh sitting on the throne as a king while the flood came. I did not understand what that meant, but I was crying. I was in tears. I could not stop. And I felt a pair of hands holding my heart, saying that you are loved. You are not what people say you are. You are valuable. So since at that point, I think I opened my heart to the Lord, and I let Him to be the Lord of my life and to be the Savior in my life. That was 2014. And fast forward, I ended up have a really good job in an international school in China, which is I also got into the international church, which were one of the places Ted and Levi visited. So that's how we came to meet each other in 2018. In 2018, I got to be involved the study there. But 2019, then we became friends. And at that point, I know I kind of have feeling for him. My mentor knew about it, and my mentor gave me a godly suggestion that I should not bring my debt into a relationship if I tend to have a relationship with this godly man. So he helped me. Fast forward to 2020, the third trip, they came on the same day. I know my heart. I like this guy, but I still have not paid my debt off. And how the Lord blessed my life is we plan to use 1 year to pay off my debt. It shortened 6 months on the same day when they're here, and I paid off the last bit of my debt. For sure, I work really hard, 13 or 15 hours sometimes a day, and have extra part-time job, but the Lord blessed me with different income. So I think that's the preparation. Mm-hmm. The Lord helped me and blessed me to be ready, clean, to be step into the marriage.
Yeah, it was a godly encouragement actually on both of our parts, but it was to not bring that debt into the relationship, and this was the Lord just honored it as He had His hand. It's just one of the many ways He had His hand on our lives as we're leading up to this relationship to help us understand that this is what He had for us, even though it seemed very
a fresh start.
Yeah, a beautiful thing. One of the things that the Lord was doing in my heart actually from the time of like 2011 to 2019 or 2020 when we started a formal relationship, was really helping me to see, understand, and put away the idol of a relationship itself in my heart. It was a challenging thing, truthfully, to even work through as I was in that season. But as a single guy, following the Lord, I remember very distinctly, in Psalm, I believe it's 37, it talks about, delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart, right? And as a single guy, it's like many times I remember looking at that verse and almost looking at it backwards, where it's like I have these desires of my heart, and I'm looking to outwardly express my delight in the Lord that I might get the desires of my own heart. But through the course of that time period, one of the things that the Lord worked in my heart personally was to recognize that this idea of marriage, or this idea of a relationship, was an idol. It was something that in my heart had a higher priority than what the Lord might have for me. And so it wasn't until the very end of that season, really, of singleness, that I was able to truly come to the Lord and be content in that season of singleness. It wasn't a light switch moment or anything like that. It was a progressive thing that certainly the Lord was working it out in my heart. But as that was the case, the beautiful thing about it was I came to understand that verse from the other end, from I think the proper perspective, as the psalmist would have, was speaking it, and that is that, as we delight ourselves in the Lord, the desires of our heart become what the Lord has for us, and they are the best things for us. They are the most beautiful things, and many times, they might be the same things that we might have had at the beginning, on the other side of it, but as we do that, then the Lord can give us those things. It's the lesson that, we learn as we understand the story of Abraham and Isaac offering his son to the, on the altar, and the Lord certainly wasn't looking for him to kill his son, and yet He was looking for him to recognize the possibility that Isaac could become an idol and not allow that to happen in his life. Through the course of that, toward the end of that season, specifically in 2018, 2019, the Lord had kind of worked that out of my heart, and I was in a season of really contentment in being single, which truthfully was part of the reason why it was hard for me to fathom the idea that, wait a minute, I'm now supposed to be looking for a relationship, or this person might be, this young lady might be the person that the Lord has for me to marry. Truthfully, the beginning of the relationship I didn't handle in a very gracious way. I was pretty just dogmatic and hard and fast about how we.
Pretty hard to get.
Yeah, I played very hard to get, and it wasn't intended to be, emotionally hurtful, but it was definitely being very careful with my emotions and hers. But the beauty in all of that, I guess the thing that I think the Lord showed me very clearly was, as a single guy, I was very, I spent a number of years really kind of spinning my wheels, looking to try to have the Lord bless what I wanted in my own life, which was a relationship. And yet with the way that I saw it, specifically the way that I could see the Lord maybe blessing it, when in reality the Lord was wanting that, and certainly was willing to have that. He it's not good that man would be alone, right? We know that from the scriptures, and yet it was only until I was willing to place this idol on the altar of the Lord and allow Him to take it away and it no longer have that priority in my life that He was going to give it to me, because then it's actually helpful for me. And so as a single guy, I guess I look back and I wonder, man, if I would have been able to grow through that season quicker, would that have been less painful? But certainly the Lord's faithfulness in it all, I don't regret it. But I do, it is an exhortation to my single self, back in 2016 or 2015, and to how I might approach that.
So I moved to America, and we started my process to gain my green card, the permanent residence card.
Permanent residency, yeah.
And we have been waited for probably almost a year So in 2022 in August, and then like after the whole long process, everything, and then I received a notice that my application is rejected. And the notice said that if I don't appeal, I need to be out of America in 30 days. You know what? At the same time, I found out I'm pregnant. I was pregnant. And so, wow. So it's like, I need to get out of here, but at the same time, I'm pregnant. And then what should we do? Are we going to another country? Or do I need to go back to China? And so of course, we appeal, and then we pray for the Lord.
Obviously, a very stressful situation. It all kind of came down at once, and like Belle said, we're evaluating what do we do. But it drove us to our knees. It drove us to the Lord again, and said, "Okay, Lord, this is something that you've done. We didn't know what we were doing, trying to work through the paperwork, the logistics of all the different government agencies involved to try to get through this process. We were just being obedient to what we know that you showed us. So what do you have here?" And there's an appeal process. We applied for, or we submitted the paperwork for that appeal, and we ended up, Belle got a green card, and it the process was worked out. The kinks were worked out. There was some steps that we had to take, certainly in the midst of all that, but it was just another season, another point, I guess, in our marriage, where I think it helped us to be reminded of the fact that as this is something that the Lord was doing in our lives, it takes the responsibility of out for us to make it work. Like we certainly we have responsibility for to be obedient and to be faithful to what He's called us to in that season, for sure. We weren't responsible for whether or not USCIS was gonna approve our application or not. That's nerve-wracking, and we ironically, there was some number of folks that we knew that we were close with that were going through some of the same processes at the same time. Applying for green cards or citizenship or visas, getting into the country with similar family dynamics, which is kind of interesting. The Lord once again put us in contact with different folks, and it was an opportunity to be an encouragement to them, really, in the midst of all that too, because we were able to just share the way the Lord had been faithful with us.
And not plan that God's timing is like just perfect. Like I got my green card right before the baby was born, so that I can get my social security number, so that I can put my information on her birthday certificate. Otherwise, her birth certificate would not have my information if I do not have the green card and the social security card come in the time. So it's just perfect timing that we could not plan. It's the Lord, how He's been faithful in our life.
The big picture summed up into a couple sentences would be just the Lord, as the Lord's doing something in and through our lives, like He's faithful to the details, and we just need to be faithful to be obedient to Him. There was a verse that has spoken a lot to Belle and us together, really, as a family, because I joke that things have all been wonderful since we've been married. Of course not. There's challenges. We're two separate people growing together, and that's part of it. But the Lord has been faithful.
In Ecclesiastes 4:12, a cord of 3 strands were not easily broken. So I'm reminded, like, we are like a triangle, and God's on the top, and we're on the bottom. And when we're personal relationship with Lord, it's getting closer. And then actually we're also getting closer. And I moved to America. I found out the man I married is not perfect.
Surprise.
And I'm not perfect either. So we definitely need help. And then the Lord is our help. So this is actually the verse. We have the decor in our apartment. And every time like we kind of like struggle, and we have some different perspective or different thought. And
very rarely.
That is a verse reminds me that pray to the Lord, get closer to Him. Not my expectation, not my what I want, not my surrender, and then willing to solve the problem, willing to be vulnerable. And then let the Lord be in the center in our relationship. So this is the verse helping me throughout all the time, the marriage. until still.
As you place him in the center of your life, collectively, or center of your marriage, and center of your lives, individually, the Lord, He holds it together.
Right.
It's His institution, so it's a beautiful thing.
Praise the
Yeah.
Lord.